All right, so this is the an example PR that we had, like a submission that we had before we paused the project. Uh, you should be focusing on the PR, even if the task description in platform, in the Handshake platform, doesn't match what's in the PR. That's not a big deal at this point. We can just change some data there in the task, like the category and stuff like that. And this is what we actually will send to the client. So this is what we care the most about, the PR itself. Maybe in the future we will care more about the actual task description in platform. But right now, if the PR is good and in the PR is a valid task and a very good task, you can accept that, even if the task description in the Handshake platform maybe is not related to this PR. Sometimes the attempters just make their task proposal in platform, then they create the PR, they see that it has issues, they didn't pass the static checks or the pass at two or whatever, and they just edit the PR until the task is good, and they forgot to just update the tasking platform.
Yeah.
Uh, so that happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
And
And I'll also add one more point to that. Like if that does happen, I mean the idea is the task is very already good to go. In an ideal world, we are trying to work in the background to see how we can make sure that this doesn't happen. But at least for now, whenever that happens, just feel free to create a thread or just add a comment somewhere which basically says that, hey, by the way, this is a task ID. This was the original like seeded category and subcategory, but this is potentially what the new category and subcategory should be, so that at least we can keep a track of what's going on there. But yeah,
Actually, so I have a proposal for that, which
yeah,
would allow us to track it internally, which
yeah,
is to accept it with a 3. Because the rubrics that
true.
I'm setting up now, the scoring criteria, would only
Correct.
have an acceptance and a 3 when there's a mismatch.
That sounds good actually. So yes, so probably what we will do is we'll send it back to revise to update the right category and subcategory in the task.tomls, and then that can move through. Yeah, Sergio, I think I like that idea. We should do that.
Great.
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, but for right now, we will focus on the PR. So the first thing you should do is just check the actual task. If you got here to files change, you can actually see the all the files in the task. For example, you can see all the data that is required for the task, the Docker files, and most importantly, the instruction and the task toml. Here you're seeing the changes made, like the red parts are the previous version, and the green parts are the most current version of the of these files. So you should focus just on the green parts. And well, the idea is just go through the instructions, make sure you familiarize yourself with the actual question, like, to understand what they are actually asking, what they are actually requesting to the models. And also in the task toml, you can find here the difficulty explanation, the verification explanation, and the solution explanation. So these are intended as high-level summaries of the task. The difficult explanation is intended to explain why the task is difficult, why this task is relevant for a professional, and why this task would mimic a real-world scenario that maybe a professional or a researcher or someone would need to ask an agent to perform or to solve. The solution explanation should be a summary or high-level explanation of what the actual solution script is doing, or in this case, the solve.py file. So yeah, this should just tell you, or this should just give you an idea of how this problem is to be solved. And the verification explanation is basically the same thing, but for the test outputs.py. basically this will be how are we checking if the solution given by the agent is actually correct or incorrect? How are we going to validate that? Uh, and this should explain what is that we actually testing. So, for example, if we're testing uh, if a certain file exists, if we're testing if a file follows a certain format, if we're testing numerical accuracy with a certain threshold or with a certain tolerance, or if we're checking exactly an exact numerical solution, maybe if they are integers or whatever, right? Or if we're checking a collection of values, maybe how are we checking those? Are we computing those values in the script itself? Are we comparing them to a truth table? I don't know. Depending on the task, you could be validating the answer in many different ways. So these verification explanations should contain exactly that explanation, right? Exactly how are we checking the final answer, right? So yeah, you should go through these files, at least the instructions and the task toml, and make sure that they make sense, that they actually explain what they are supposed to be explaining, and maybe just take a quick look at the solve.py and the test outputs to make sure that there's nothing fishy right there. Uh, Sometimes the solution script is not a solution at all. Maybe sometimes it's just hard-coded values that are given in a file or something like that. And we don't want that. We want that for the solution script to be the actual solution of the problem, right? And to contain explanations on how this file is working, what it is doing. If it contains some functions or some parts of the code that may be not too clear, they should have doc strings explaining what each section of the script does. Or in this case, you have a summary here that uh, probably explains what the script is actually doing, right? And a similar thing with the test outputs.py. In this case, for example, there would be an issue with the task because there are no test.sh file, and that is a requirement for the project, right? So probably this task needs to be sent back just to add these files and to be revised by the author. So yeah, if you found any issues with the task structure, well, yeah, with the file structure or with the files itself, maybe the files are just, as I was telling you, just hard-coded values in the solution script, or there are some files missing, or this is also like not providing any tests for the requirements in the task, then you should send back the task to for revision, right? And once you go through all those files, uh, you can take a quick look at the static checks here. These are basically checks that test the file's structure and the actual contents of the files to make sure that, well, if for example, that the instruction is codependent, that is difficulty, or that it seems like a difficult problem, that it seems like an interesting or realistic problem that is novel and it's not just a standard problem that everyone knows how to solve, right? If it is actually solvable, this actually checks if the solution script actually solves the problem, right? And actually contains a solution for the request. If it's unambiguous, if the outcome can be verified, if the instruction is concise and it doesn't have like any fluff there or anything that could be removed from the task, but still made a good problem or a good question or a realistic question. Uh, if the data schema is structured, if it's verifiable, uh, if the verification is functional, if it is reproducible, if the test instruction has doc strings, actually is aligned with the rest of the task. If the task seems like cheat proof, like maybe the models cannot cheat about, maybe to test if the models cannot just find the answer online or can find the answer within the files itself or something like that, right? Analyze the solution quality to make sure that the solve.py script actually derives the output via real source edits, and whatever, right? So all these checks here are basically what you have to check in the files themselves. These checks are aimed for you to help you actually assess the validity of the files, the validity of the instruction, the task toml, the solution script, test, uh, the test scripts, and all these things, right? This is an LLM validation, so it can make mistakes, and your job as reviewer is to make sure that this is actually accurate, right? Here you will have some notes telling you some things that you may want to take a deeper look in it. So, for example, this is telling you, okay, the task toml schema may have some issues there that you may have to revise, that you may have to review. So maybe take a look at this with more detail. So yeah, you should always take a look at these notes here. They may point you to possible issues with the task that these static checks didn't caught for some reason. Okay, after that, there is a duplicate check. This is basically just telling you that this task is not a duplicate from some previous submissions in terminal benchmark. Of course, if this is quite hard to check actually by hand or by a human, because you will have to go through all the terminal benchmark stuff and make sure that there are no similar tasks to the
Yeah,
right
you should. I think that you can just ignore that because this is something that we need to handle internally. Your main focus should not be this duplicate check or the task validation results because we're assuming that that part of the pipeline is working as intended. And if there are things that perhaps we're not catching, that is on us to fine tune those checks. But the LLMs can fail on criteria or other things that you can actually see. So focus on those and not so much on these automated checks that are for this they need to start thousands of tasks. So it's not something that you can visibly do.
Yeah.
So we don't expect you to do it.
Yeah, that's why since this is difficult for a human to actually check, you can ignore this. And well, the task validation results is what we do here is just build the Docker image, run the Oracle solution. But with Oracle solution, we mean the solution script provided in the task, and then we run the test against that solution. And well, all tests should pass, right? That means that the solution is actually correct. Well, it's correct according to the verifiers or to the test script. And then the NOP test, which is just run the test without running the solution script, and that should not pass, right? So yeah, just to give you a little more context of what these tests are actually doing. But as Sergio said, you don't need to mind yourself a lot about this. And well, then the PASAT 2. This is the first important part of the actual trial difficulty or the difficulty test of the task. What we do here is we run an, an agent 2 times. In this case, it was called Opus, but it may be different depending uh, on the task you're seeing. But basically, we run this model or this agent 2 times, and the agent will try to solve the problem. And here, the PASAT analysis, if you click here, you will get a full analysis of the actual trials. And the idea here is for you to validate if these trials are actually, or if these failures are actually valid or not. You may be already familiar with this, but an attempter cannot move forward if at least one of these is not valid. oh, sorry, if at least one of these is they can only move forward if at least one of these is a valid failure. So in this case, it seems that we have two valid failures, apparently, but again, this validation is made by an LLM and it might make mistakes. So your job as a reviewer is to just make sure that these are actually valid, that these are actually valid failures that an agent got. And what we mean by the agent failure, but valid agent failures, is that this failure should not be caused because the instruction is ambiguous or because there was some misguiding in the instruction or there was some incorrect data or some incorrect instruction there that wasn't disclosed. So for example, if you provide a data file and that data file contains incorrect data or contains incorrect information, but you didn't tell the model in the instruction, okay, be careful about these files because they are incorrect or they have issues or whatever. The model has no issue, has no reason to actually distrust the files you're giving. That right? So if they take them as truth, as okay, this is correct, and I will work with this, that would not be fair for us to just consider that a failure because we basically are cheating the model. We're guiding it into an incorrect answer by providing incorrect information, and we're not saying, okay, this is incorrect, be careful about it, right? So that type of failure would not be a valid failure. Also, if you don't uh, provide an instruction about the formatting of a file or the output, and the model just use its own convention, then and we penalize the model for that, then we are also being unfair because we didn't specify what format we want or what conventions we're using, and we're penalizing the model for not guessing or conventions or formatting that we specified in the verification, right? So those types of failures are not valid. This validation is intended to check all of those invalid failures, but it may fail. It may make mistakes, and maybe it will pass an invalid failure as valid. So you have to make sure that these are actually valid, that these are not failures because the task had issues, the task was ambiguous, the task has red herrings or some things like that, right?
Sorry, always check whenever all the agents or many of the agents go to a certain answer that contradicts the golden solution, because this could be because there's an undisclosed rule, like Cesar said, that is making the agents fail unfairly. It could be that the golden solution is incorrect. So the expert thinks that this is the correct answer, and the agents actually show that it's not. That would require like you go over the solution and see if there are any issues there. And it could also be that the agents have taken a valid approach that the expert is disregarding. Let's say that the expert only wants this approach to be used, but they're not mentioning that in the instructions. So they're punishing any agent that does something that they have not explicitly told them to. So that will be also invalid. So always check in these logs because they, even if the PASA case shows like a failure, it may not be a valid one. So a lot of what you have to do is to audit this and see if there are any flags that could point to an issue in the golden solution, in the specifications, with ambiguity or any of those kind of issues.
Yeah, exactly. And to help you actually spot those issues, we have different sections here. So the first section is the per trajectory rubric. This will give you an assessment of how well the trajectory was. For example, the first one is task specification. This will tell you if the agent actually thinks the task is well specified, if it's not ambiguous. Then the reward hacking. This will tell you if the agent was able to cheat the response or not. The difficulty crux. This will tell you if the agent actually failed for the intended reasons in the difficulty explanation in the task TOML or not, or if it fails for any other reason, or if it thinks that the difficulty was not high enough and the model was able to just solve the task without problem, right? A near miss will tell you if the agent got really close to the correct answer, but failed for minor reasons. Probably it failed because a numerical answer was right outside the tolerance given in the verification script, or maybe there was a collection of values that the agent had to produce, and it produced everything correctly except for a couple of them. Or maybe the correct answer was given, but there was some ordering issues or some ordering mistakes or some rounding mistakes or things like that, right? So it will tell you if the model got really, really close to the correct answer, but missed for some minor details. Refusals will tell you if the agents refuse to solve the problem for whatever reason, maybe for ethical concerns or things like that. A low timeout will tell you if the models the agents just time out, that they were solving the problem, but they were not given enough time to actually solve it, and that's why that's why they failed, or that's why they didn't provide a correct answer. And approach validity will tell you if the the approach or the steps taken by the agent to solve the problem seem actually to be valid, seem to be correct, uh, based on the instruction and the task tumbler, right? Uh, you will get more details on this in a later section, so let me get through that. But first, we will see the fail reasons. The fail reasons will give you a summary of why the agents that failed actually failed. It will tell you something like, okay, the trials failed both for the same reason in this case, and the reason was this and this and this, right? It will tell you the main issue of why they fail, and may tell you also secondary aspects of the failure. And it will also tell you if every trial failed for the same reason, or maybe it will tell you, okay, out of all these trials, this fails for this reason, and this other fails for this other reason. So this will give you like a summary of why the agents fail. This can help you spot issues in the task. For example, if all, as Sergio was saying, if all the trials fail for the same reason, there might be an issue there. Maybe there is a specification issue there. Maybe the agents are understanding certain aspect of the task in the same way, and the author actually intended for a different interpretation. So that may be an issue of clarity in the instruction, not an issue in the models. So yeah, this can help you spot trends in how the agents are actually failing. Then the golden versus agent values. This will compare the final outcomes of both the agents and the golden solution. The golden solution means the solution provided by the author of the task in the solution script, probably, or in the task toml. And this will tell you, okay, the golden expected was this one, and the agent got this one, and it was off by a certain margin. In this case, it was completely wrong. But for numerical values, you may get a margin here telling you, okay, it missed by 1% or by 0.5% or something like this. And then it will tell you what trials actually got this, right? So yeah, this can also help you spot certain trends in the actual solutions. For example, if all the agents values are the same, are consistent, that may indicate that the agents that all the agents took the same approach, they understood the same, they took the same assumptions. And if those are very different to the golden solution, maybe the golden solution is wrong. Maybe there's an issue with the task. Maybe there's an instruction that all the agents understood in the same way, but the golden solution took a different approach that was not disclosed in the instruction. Things like that, right? So if every agent value or if every trial got the same value, different from the expected golden solution, that's a red flag. You should investigate why that was the case, right? Then the failing test. This will tell you what actual test in the verification script, in the test outcomes.py script, actually failed. This can help you spot issues in the task description, in the task instruction. Probably there is some formatting instruction that was not clear, and that's why every agent is failing some formatting test or some existing test. Um, I don't know. For example, maybe all agents are failing because there is a test that checks if certain file exists, and they all fail that test. Why would an agent not produce that file? Maybe the file is there, but it's named differently, and that's why it failed the task, it failed the test. Or maybe it was not clear in instruction that that file needs to be created, but in this verification you are testing for that file, so that would be an issue with the prompt. Or maybe there are some tests that check formatting of the solution. Maybe you're asking for a JSON file and you're asking for a certain format of that file. And well, if you are asking that in instruction, you have to test that in the verifiers. So maybe the verification script is testing for that specific formatting, and that is the test that is failing. So why are the agents failing that formatting test? Is it because they failed at producing the file? They failed at understanding what was the required formatting, or was it because the instruction didn't specify the formatting too clearly, or maybe at all? So yeah, that also may be a red flag right there. Uh, so yeah, this can help you also spot some issues with the instruction or with the task itself. Then you will get the golden solution approach. This will be a short summary of what the solution script is doing and how they are solving the problem, along with the agent approach that will be the same as short description of how the agents are solving the problem. And approach difference. This will tell you what is the difference between, or the main difference between the agent approach and the golden solution approach. If the agent failed, it means that they made something different from the golden solution, right? There was something there. Maybe there was one step when the golden solution did something and the agents did a different thing, and that's why they landed in a different final result, right? So this can help you spot that difference. This can help you understand why the agents fail, why they took a different decision, probably, why they took a different approach, and it can help you understand if that different approach or that different solution or that different decision that the agents took, you can tell if that is a valid approach, if that it was a valid decision, or if that is an actual mistake that the agent made. Yeah, and probably you can also spot if the agents made this decision based on an instruction in the task, or based on a file, or based on an ambiguity in the task. So yeah, I think this is very important to help you understand why the agents fail and why the agents took a different approach, and if that approach is actually valid or not. After that, you have the validity of agent approach. You have to take this with a grain of salt. This is an assessment from the model, from the model actually doing this verification. An assessment of telling you if the agent approach was actually valid and if the agents failed for a valid or a genuine reason or a valid mistake, and not because the task was underspecified or has an ambiguity or something like that. So in principle, if this validity approach is a pass, the task should be good, the task should be non-ambiguous, should be well specified, and should be a really difficult task that the agents actually failed to solve and they struggle and they gave an incorrect answer. But this is an LLM evaluation, so it might make mistakes, it might think that something is valid when it is not, and we don't want to take this as an absolute truth. So your job as a reviewer is actually make sure that this validity pass is actually valid, is actually accurate, based on all the information that you already have from the previous sections, right? And this will also give you some comments about why the model here thinks that this is a genuine or a valid failure. And if there's something that may need further attention, it will give it to you. It will tell you something like, okay, I think this is valid, but there's something here that seems fishy, that maybe it's an under specification, so maybe take a look at that. So yeah, your job will be to actually make sure that this is accurate, that this is valid. Then it will give you more details about the rubric aggregate. This is the first section here. So it will tell you about the task specification. It will tell you some more comments about it, the reward hacking, the difficulty crux, the near miss, the refusals, the load timeout, and the approach validity. Like this will just give you extra context about these rubric aggregates. And finally, you will get a summary here. This summary will basically just tell you, okay, I think the trials are legitimate or not. If the difficulty crux seems genuine, or if the agents actually fail to solve the problem, and not because the problem is difficult and not because the problem is underspecified or ambiguous or something like that. So based on all of these, you should be able to determine if the task is good and if the problem is actually a solvable problem that the agents failed to solve, or if the task have some issues that need to be fixed, but the difficulty here is still valid, that the agent's failure are still valid, and maybe you just have to send it back to the attempter to make some minor fixes, but the task has potential and will probably be good to deliver once they fix those issues. Or probably it will tell you if the task has no potential, like the task is unsalvageable, and you will have to basically rewrite the entire task from scratch to make it a hard problem that the models are struggling to solve. So in that case, you should just reject the task, right? Uh, in case this is not enough, maybe you need more information about the agent trials. You can go here to view logs and artifacts. If you go here to trials and you go to upload hardware output, you get here a link to download the full agent trajectories. So in case you want to analyze the full trajectory, because that summary or that analysis wasn't enough for you to determine if the task is good or not, you can download this and analyze them if you want. We're expecting this to not be necessary in most cases. Hopefully the trial analysis should be enough for you to determine that, but sometimes it's not, right? Again, that is an LLM verification, and LLMs are not always reliable, right? So yeah, you have here the full agent trial, the full agent trajectories, to help you spot other issues or to give you more context or more information about why the agents fail. And let me go back to here to the PR. So that analysis was for the PASA 2, but the same applies for the agent trials. This is actually more informative because you have more trials. So you have more chances for the model to try different approaches or to uh, give you more context on the actual problem, right? For example, maybe two trials that fail or that got the same final answer is not very informative. But if 8 trials gave the same final answer, then that probably means that there is something there happening with the task, right? So yeah, this has the same sections. You have the per trajectory rubric, the fail reasons, the golden versus agent values, the failing tests, the golden solution approach, the agent approach, the approach difference, the validity of agent approach, the rubric aggregate, and the final summary, right? So again, your job as reviewers will be to make sure that these failures are actually legit, they are actually valid, and that the agent actually failed because the task is difficult and not because the task is not well written or not well specified, or because the verification has issues. Maybe it's passing correct answers as correct, or uh, maybe the solution is incorrect, things like that, right? So yeah, once you have all the information you need to make an assessment about the task, you will either reject the task, approve the task, or send it back for revision. You should always reject tasks when um, there is an ambiguity in the prompt. Maybe if all the trials are failing because there are some ambiguity or some under specification or something that was not disclosed. And if you were to fix that, if you were to actually give the instruction correctly, or if you were to remove that ambiguity to clarify some things, or if you were to actually give the explicit formatting or naming conventions or whatever convention you're using, and if you were to give that and the models will solve the problem correctly with that information, then the task is not difficult enough, right? The models were actually solving the problem correctly. The issue was instruction, and at that point, it's not worth for us to keep working on the task, right? We know the task is too easy, and the author will probably need to rewrite the task from scratch to make it harder. So at that point, we will reject the task. Or if there is a major issue in the solution or the verification scripts, maybe the solution is completely incorrect. So in that case, we reject it. Or if the verification is verifying incorrect solutions, maybe we should also reject the task, right? Uh, when can we send it back to revision? Only if maybe there are some invalid failures here, but there are still some valid ones. For example, in this case, let's say that these first four failures were invalid because the agent was missing some information from the prompt, or didn't understood some instruction correctly, or something like that. So maybe these are invalid, but maybe these other four are actually valid. Maybe the model, for some reason, uh, in these trials understood what the author intended and still failed for valid reasons. In that case, we may send it back to revision because the task is still ambiguous. There are still some problems in the prompt. But if we fix those problems, the agents will probably still fail because we know that these were actually valid failures, right? So maybe the task is difficult enough, but it still has some issues that needs to be fixed. So in those cases, we will send it back for revision. We score it at 3, and hopefully the author will solve those issues, send it back, and now we will have a completely specified task that has valid failures. Also,
Mhm.
there may be some minor issues with the verifiers, the verification script. Maybe it's not testing something in the task, but that is not a big issue. The tasks are still is still difficult enough, and the agents are failing for valid reasons. So in that case, we can send it back. Just tell the attempter, okay, just please fix this issue with the verifier, add this test, or maybe this test is not well calibrated, so maybe increase the tolerance or decrease it or whatever. And once they fix that, maybe the task will still fail, right? So in those cases, we can send it back for revision. But if you think that the agents are actually solving the problem correctly and they're just missing for a minor thing that was an underspecified instruction, and if you specify that instruction, the models will be able to solve the problem correctly and perfectly, then we just reject the task. The task is not difficult enough, and it's better for the attempter to just work in a new task at that point. Okay, so yeah, that would be the general walkthrough of how you should be reviewing the tasks here. Do you have any questions or any comments?
Uh, uh, I would like to share my screen for a second to show you a quick summary of how to grade the tasks. This is going to be in the reviewer guidelines, but we know it's a lot of information for you to process right now. So as a quick summary, I'm going to share my whole screen. The scoring rules that we are using are: if the task has no issues, and this means that it's good to go as is, you don't need to make any modifications, then it's a 5. If it has an issue, but it's not blocking, so it's not an ambiguity, it's not that we need to recalibrate a verifier or anything, that would be just a small detail. Perhaps there are some, one of the explanations or something in the instructions is poorly written, there is a grammar mistake, a typo, all those minor details that would not significantly affect the task, which could also be, let's say that in the instructions you ask for 10 things and one of them, which is very minor, is not tested through a verifier. I would consider that to be a non-blocking issue because it's still making the models fail. So in those cases, we accept it with a 4. The only case where we accept the task with a 3 is where the task has no issues, but the category of the task does not match what is in the PR. So in the in-platform task, you have a certain requirement, and then in the one that you submitted, the one that you find in the PR has a different one. We don't want to reward that kind of behavior because we need to keep a certain spread of tasks, but we still want to pass that, so we give it a 3. Now, if the task has minor issues that would block the delivery, but do not flip the difficulty, then you revise it with a 3. Blocking issues are, so for instance, ambiguity, incorrect facts or instructions, an incorrect solution, leaking part of the solution to the agents. Perhaps you forgot to remove part of the output files that are expected from in the environment, but the agents are still failing because of another issue. Well, that would still be blocking because we don't want to leak answers, but if you know that if you're already given the solutions and the agents are failing, by removing the solutions, you're not making the task easier. So that is not going to cause the task to flip in terms of difficulty. But
yeah, so something that tends to happen a lot is that in tasks where you're asking to fix some bugs in a script, sometimes the script has a docstring that says, "Here is the bug." So in those cases, you're actually telling the agent, "Okay, here is the bug. Just fix this part," right? So that would be an example of leaking the answer to the agent.
Exactly. We want to remove that because that makes the task unrealistic and easier, but at the same time, it's not going to cause the task to be non-deliverable once we fix it. So those that we sent with a revise with a 3. Now, if there are major issues, and this is personal, at some point you have to decide, okay, now this task is very poor quality, but still fixable. Let's say that there was a major ambiguity in the instructions, and it shows poor quality on behalf of the attempter. That, well, they do not deserve a 3, but it would still make the models fail, so we can fix that. So in those cases, graded with a 2. Now, if there are any issues that by fixing them would flip the difficulty, so agents will stop failing, and that's something that you can most generally assess by checking what aspect of the task the agents are missing. For instance, the formatting. If the agents are not meeting the formatting requirements of the verifiers, it's certainly the case that once you tell them what format to use, they are all going to pass. Well, those cases we need to reject. And if the task is a mess, it has a lot of issues, and you're not able to assess whether the difficulty is right or not, but you do know that fixing all of those things is essentially going back to the drawing board and starting the task from scratch. Well, in those cases, we also reject it. The only instances where we give it 1 is where attempters are ignoring the instructions from the reviewer, and do note that sometimes they try to gaslight us. So they might say that they have fixed something, but you go to the PR. So in the task, they dispute or say, okay, I fixed it. Then you go to the PR and there are no new comments and the issue is still there. Well, that is definitely a rejection. They might disagree with the issue. They say, okay, now that this is not correct because of these reasons. And if there are valid reasons, okay, you can accept that. But what we're trying to flag here is whenever they are not engaging with the feedback that was received and are trying to pass the task anyway. And of course, egregious use of LLM or spam. This is also, generally speaking, because most tasks have some degree of LLM use. It's not that we say, okay, this task was done with LLMs, we're going to reject it. But if there are poor quality signals from the task where you open the instructions and they are almost nonsensical in the way that they are written, and they show that they are not realistic at all, and the task itself shows a great disregard for the instructions, just in those cases, give it a 1. I think I have never scored a task with a 1 except for this, when they ignore valid feedback. But do know that that is one of the possible outcomes. And like I said, the difficulty flip is when changing that aspect of the task would cause the threshold, the agent failures to be insufficient. Right now, it's 4 valid failures out of 8 trials. If by changing that, you get 3 failures, well, that's a flip. We cannot use the task. Let me stop sharing.
Also, speaking about authors or attempters trying to gaslighting us, let me share my screen again. Do notice that in this validity of agent approach and even in the difficulty crux, here the difficulty crux, the model here is taking into account the task TOML, the difficulty explanation. So, and sometimes the difficulty explanation is incorrect. Like the author may be saying, okay, this is difficult because the agents will fail because of this thing. And the validity of agent approach will say, okay, the author says that the agents will gonna fail here, and they did fail here, so this is a legit failure, right? But maybe in the task TOML, that is actually not valid reason for failure, and that may be incorrect, or there may be, that the task TOML may be incorrect, right? So you have to also make sure that the reasons why the task is failing or why the agents are failing according to the task TOML are actually valid, are actually correct. For example, you could find some task that says in the task TOML in the difficulty explanation something like, okay, the agents will fail because let me say a very silly example. They will tell you that they will compute 1 plus 1 equals 2, and that is incorrect. And then the models will compute 1 plus 1 equals 2, and the validity of agent approach will say, okay, the models did what the intended difficulty was because they computed an incorrect value of 1 plus 1. Right? At that point, the agents are actually not failing. They give the correct answer, but the task TOML said that the correct answer was incorrect. So that would be an invalid failure, right? That would be an issue with the task because the task is testing for incorrect answers. So be careful with that. That's most of the times where this validity of agent approach is actually invalid because they took into account what the task TOML said and the task TOML was incorrect. All right. So are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, I do have a few questions. So
Yeah, go
like
ahead.
yeah, so this is like generally when like I'm reviewing, I tend to notice some things that stick out. And I mean, this kind of goes back to like your like your golden solution approach and like, how the agent can try to adhere to that or but like the idea is that if an agent uses a valid approach, but then it fails because like the verifier expected the author's golden solution or like their exact approach, do you think that should be like a revision, or do you think that should be a rejection?
Yeah, that looks like a rejection. Like if the agents took a different approach, but actually got a correct answer, a valid answer, then
Mm,
that will be a rejection. Because if you were to be in the correct approach in the instruction, then the
mm.
agent will reach the same answer as the golden solution, right? Or if you allow the verifiers to account for all the valid approaches, then the agent would pass.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So yeah, if you see that the agent uh, actually followed a correct, a valid approach that is permitted by the instructions,
Mhm.
then yeah, that would be a rejection. If they took an approach, a different approach from golden, that is not permitted by the instruction, maybe the instructions has something there that says, okay, this approach would be incorrect or don't do this, and the agents did that, then that would be a valid failure.
Okay, yeah, that thank you for that. That explained a lot.
Great.
I do have one more question.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of like more towards what you just talked about, Sergio, about like this matrix for like this grade. So like the idea that I'm getting at is that if like fixing the issue, this issue, whatever it may be, like fix does that preserve the task's difficulty? Like that's what I would assume. If it does, then I would just make it a revision. But if it doesn't, then I would reject it, because then it just sounds like it's fake, trying to hard to fake than actually being reasonably hard. Does that make sense?
Yes, essentially, there are two axes that we use to decide whether the task should be rejected or revised, and that is the time that it would take and whether it would preserve the difficulty, just like you said. So if those small changes drop the difficulty, at that point, the attempter has to go back to square one and do the task from scratch. So you could say, oh, well, they could keep improving upon that task. But at some point, we have to say, okay, this approach will not work. Go start a new task. Use what you have, what you were given as feedback as a basis, and try to stamp the models. But it's cutting the line of the lifeline of the task. So if it's a small thing that they can fix reasonably and it keeps the task good enough for delivery, yes, revise it. If not, we just reject it.
Okay, yeah. That's kind of what I've been understanding, and I will say, like in my experience when I was tasking, it seemed to me like lots of the issues that I could have solved might have been because like I was trying hard to like preserve the difficulty, and that's what caused me to take longer on my tasks. But like sometimes when I see this like these submitted tasks, I'm noticing that like they go when I revise them, I tell them to revise them and they come back. It seemed to me like they're just trying to pass like they're trying to stump the model, but it didn't really preserve the difficulty, and so I kind of like insist on like rejecting. But I luckily I haven't had too many of those happen so far. But yeah, that does clarify a lot. So that's kind of one of, I think, maybe an issue some of the other reviewers might be seeing as well. So that's just, I think, like a fundamental problem with like the approach instead.
Yeah. To give you one example, there was one task that was passing. So then the attempter removed a piece of the instruction that made something ambiguous. The task started to fail, and the pass at 8 signaled that there was an issue there. So there was an ambiguity. So some of the agents were not sure about this being fair. So that got to our review layer, and of course, it's a manufactured difficulty. Just fix that ambiguity, and the task is very solvable. That's and we have the paper trail because of the commit history.
Yeah.
For that particular.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. That's all the questions I had. If I have another question, I might chime in. So.
Also, speaking about ambiguities, um, the idea of the project or the idea of the prompts is to not give the models everything that they like a step-by-step solution of the problem, right? That we don't want uh, to guide the model too much. We don't want to hand-holding them and tell them, okay, you have to do this, then you have to do this, you have to do this, use this, use this, use this, use this method. Like we don't want that. We want the agents to make their own choices, to make their own decisions, to take their own approaches to solving these problems, right? So it's fine if there are some things that are not specified in the instruction. However, uh, a solver, either an agent or an expert, a human, should be able to deduce everything that they need from the instruction and from the input files that they are given, right? So if there is something that seems like an ambiguity, but you can actually deduce that from the instruction or from the input files, and an expert would say, okay, yeah, these were not given, but I have to use this because of expertise or because I can deduce it from this or whatever, then that would not be an ambiguity. That would be a valid piece of information that can be omitted from the instruction, right? So most of the valid failures that we have are for that reason, that the models thought that it was an ambiguity and understand something and did something wrong, but it was not actually an ambiguity. You can actually deduce that piece of information from the instruction, and from the files, right? So yeah, you have to be careful with that when analyzing these approaches. That's what the validity of agent approach is intended to help you with. This part will tell you, okay, I think this was kind of ambiguous, but you can deduce that from this information in the prompt or this information in the input files. Or sometimes it will tell you something like, oh, the agents failed because they they did this thing differently from golden. But the instruction actually contains this piece of this or this sentence that leads to this final answer, right? So the agents were actually incorrect because you have that information in the instruction, just not explicitly, or things like that, right? So this part is intended to help you assess that part. But yeah, again, this is not 100% reliable, so use your own judgment on that.
You can definitely grab the or the solution explanation from the contributors, from the fellows, and check whether that makes sense. If they are mentioning the trap and why they are using a different approach. But always take it with a lot of salt because they might be incorrect. And like Cesar said, the best tasks are those that have an apparent decision, something that the agent thinks they can do in a certain way, but there is a hidden requirement, either in the data or from domain knowledge that would say, okay, now you cannot do that in this way because of this. But the information that is provided in the task is enough of a contract so that an expert that takes that is able to reach the correct solution. Some tasks rely on what I call everything but the kitchen sink approach, which is to introduce a lot of rules to the point that it's a very artificial task. And because it's overwhelming the models, perhaps they make one small mistake when following one of 30 rules. And it is a valid failure. It's artificial. Those we are still approving, but those are very difficult to audit because it might be how these abstract rules interact with the data with a large data set.
Basically, the rule of thumb is if you can somewhat defend the agent approach based on the instruction. Like if an expert would say, okay, yeah, this can be valid, or given the instruction, yeah, this is a possible approach, then that means the instruction is ambiguous. But if you can prove that the solution made by or the approach taken by the agent was incorrect, there is no way you can defend that as a valid or as a correct approach, then it is a valid failure. So there should be always, for valid failures, there should be always something that you can use to prove that that is actually incorrect. Either a part of the instruction that you can say, okay, the instructions say this, and because of this, this approach is incorrect, or this decision is incorrect. Or there's something in the input file that you say, okay, if you go to the input files and do this analysis, you get this, and this proves that the agent approach was incorrect or that this step was a mistake or something like that. So if you can do that, then that is without a doubt a valid failure. If you cannot do that, and if there is somehow uh, a defense for that approach, if an expert would say, okay, yeah, this maybe is not the best answer, but according to the instruction, there's nothing preventing me from doing that. Or according to the input files, there is nothing inherently wrong with this. Like this could be valid in some cases or in some scenarios. Then that would mean that the task is ambiguous.
Yep. I was gonna add also, like, that's one of the bigger things that I typically notice is that, well, some things are trying to be declared as like a hidden edge case, or they're just intentionally trying to um, obfuscate some some valid information, and so they don't put this in the instructions marked down, and they don't specify it in the contract. And so eventually I start to realize that this is just not as valid as it seems. And I try to discern if this is actually like just like an edge case or something that a agent could solve without needing that information, or if it's just straight up an ambiguity. So that's kind of like what I struggle with uh, sometimes, but like as I review, typically it's starting to become a little easier to like find those like issues. So yeah.
Yeah, that's actually the difficult part of reviewing tasks like this. Like realizing if this is a real ambiguity or if it is a real mistake that the agents made. Sometimes it's not clear enough if you're actually being fair to the model by providing all the information it needs, or you're being unfair by hiding some information from it. So yeah, that is the actual the actual aim of our review, to make sure that the failures are actually valid or not, right? So yeah, as you said, that is the tricky part of these reviews. All right, is there any other question or comment? All right, if not, yeah, feel free to stay in the room if in case you have any more questions while you're reviewing a task. We're actually encouraging for you to make reviews while you're still in the war room, in case you have any questions or any doubts about the actual review you're doing, so we can help you with that. So just open your